If your child comes in with one question, our job is not to give that one answer. Our job is to send them back with 5 questions.
Welcome to the Nurturing Minds podcast,
a science-driven approach to parenting and education.
We are 2 parents, 2 scientists, and 2 people who care deeply about raising kids who are resilient, confident, and happy.
In a world that's becoming increasingly digital, we believe real connection, emotional well-being, and curiosity matter more than ever.
In each episode, we share insights from latest research, our own experiences, and conversations with experts from around the world to help you support the children in your life. I'm Dr Sonali Dasgupta, a research scientist turned educationist, mentor to talented teenagers, and founder of the STEMonsters education platform.
And I am Dr Blanka Kellermayer, neuroscientist, mum of 2 very active boys, certified parenting coach, and founder of Dr Blanka Peaceful Parenting.
Welcome back to another episode of the Nurturing Minds podcast. Today we have a very exciting topic to discuss, one that will interest all of us parents and educators. And that is, how do we raise curious kids? How do we spark their curiosity? And more importantly, how can we keep that curiosity alive, even as our kids go through more structured, test-based learning? So, Sonali, you came to education from scientific research, and now you work towards transforming how children actually learn for life. We throw the word curiosity around constantly. We all say we want curious kids, but what is curiosity actually?
Thank you, Blanka, for starting with that question. I love it that you started with the word curiosity, which is the core of learning. Every child is born with that innate desire to know more. We have heard of the troublesome twos where every child is going around asking, why, what if, what happened, why does this happen, why does the rain make us sweat? And so that is curiosity. It's a sense of deprivation, which is not bad, pleasant sense of deprivation, where we want to get the answer to that question. And then that gives us a sense of satisfaction. In fact, in 1994, Loewenstein actually did a research and he published a theory known as the information gap theory, where he defined it technically. He said, curiosity is the feeling, and I'm going to read it out. So curiosity is the feeling we get when we notice a gap between what we know and what we want to know. In simple terms, it's just a child asking what if, and everybody does this from birth. And if we can keep that curiosity in its place as the children grow up, then we have a learner for life. I know you asked only about the definition of curiosity, but the one thing that I still want to mention is this gap is not a one size fits all. We'll talk about it more, but the size of that gap matters.
Wow. And also from what you mentioned, that cycle of wanting to know and the satisfaction of actually finding an answer is actually, from a brain perspective, is what you've talked about, is the reward system, the dopamine system, which then also switches on our memory pathway. So it strengthens the memory. So then that's why curiosity and learning can go and develop together. So they actually remember more. So they amplify each other, basically.
Absolutely. We've been talking about the reward system, intrinsic motivation to learn. All of that is essentially a reward cycle. And that reward cycle comes from the sense of getting the reward. And in this case, that reward is the answer to a question.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you say that children learn to be curious, or are they born that way?
So I think there would be every parent who is probably listening to us or a teacher would know that when the children are really young, really, really young, when the system, so-called education system, has not shaped them, they have endless questions. We have the unending whys and the unending whats. Everybody's learned about that. And that is actually the curiosity in full face. Right? So the question is not about, do the children learn to be curious? Every child is born curious. The important question is, how do we ensure that a child remains curious? How do we stop it from turning off as they grow up?
I think you've touched on something that's very important. And I think as parents, it's what breaks our hearts when we see the curiosity drying up. Although I do think back to the times when all the why questions came, and it is exhausting as a parent, it's like all the whys, and sometimes you run out of answers, don't you?
Yes.
So yeah, but it's fun. So from everything that you've seen in the classrooms and in the STEM programs, when does it fade? When does curiosity start to fade? And are there any reasons for that?
So I've been thinking about this a lot. We've been working with many, many children, about more than 2,000 children right now. And we've been studying internally, trying to identify what's really happening. Children generally start to stop asking questions when they probably reach primary school. In fact, this is not my observation. There's a beautiful book called The Hungry Mind and the Origins of Curiosity in Childhood in 2015. And this was by one of the psychologists called Susan Engel. And she documented as to when do children stop being curious. And one of the key things that she found out was that it was somewhere around the upper primary grades, like 9, 10 years. Till that time, they're very, very curious. But once they reach early middle school, so about, let's say, 12 years old, or the teens are going to hit them, that's the time when the questions slowly start to drop. And this is an observation we ourselves have found across the board over the last 4-5 years. And we've been trying to figure out what is actually happening. And what we realize is that it is not one reason which is making the children lose their curiosity once they reach middle school. There's a bunch of things that are actually happening, which kind of conditions them. And the environment kind of cultivates a feeling in the child where curiosity does not seem to be rewarding to them. So I'll give you some of the pointers that we have seen.
Sorry for interrupting here. You mean from a societal perspective?
From a societal perspective, from an educational perspective, as a mom, if your child who is, let's say, 3 years old comes and asks you, why is the sky blue? You would find it very interesting because, oh, my child has asked this. But imagine a child who is in grade 5, grade 6, and you expect them to know the answer, and they still come and ask you the same question, why is the sky blue? You would reprimand them for not knowing the answer. Or I don't mean you, but in general, you would expect them to know the answer. But imagine if you were not expecting that, and if you were still feeding on that curiosity, the next time the child has another question, they'll come back to you. But if they feel or they realize that, oh, he or she was expected to know the answer, they're not going to come back to you and ask the second question. So it's the societal conditioning partly, and partly in the educational system, where not just that they are supposed to know the answers, it's also about they have to know the right answers. There is very little scope of failure. If I were to pinpoint two main reasons, I would say one is this whole right answer culture, which is you have to be right. There is no excuse for you to be wrong. And then once that happens, where is that gap between what I know and what I want to know? You have closed that gap. So you ask a question, and you're supposed to know the answer. There's no gap for you to explore further.
Yeah. And also, I think I've for sure heard it many times during my studies that there's no such thing as a stupid question, which is, yes, I do value that approach. And at the same time, I didn't feel safe enough to ask the questions. So it sort of was this double standard, really, in my experience.
That's right. At the end of the day, when you're learning in a group, it's a societal thing which needs to change, which needs to transfer. The environment in the classroom, where after a certain point, even though the teacher is saying that, yes, it's okay to ask any question, at some point they start feeling they are the only ones asking, right? So it has to be an environment when everybody is asking, where everybody is getting the answers and everyone's questions is being dealt with the same seriousness. So I think it's that fear of being wrong, whether it's in terms of the question or whether it's in terms of the answer. That is the biggest fear. When we talk of toddlers or young children, they don't have fear. The embarrassment term doesn't exist in their vocabulary. But as they grow up, words like embarrassing, words like fear start coming into their vocabulary. And that's what kind of really pulls the bar of curiosity down, because they don't feel safe to ask. They don't feel encouraged to ask the question.
Mm.
And then there's obviously, you always have to get the right answer in exams, or the teacher wants to finish the class, so they give the answer immediately. So again, you're not keeping that gap where I navigate myself, or the child navigates and reaches the answer. And in doing so, they kind of touch upon multitude of other things which open up other gaps.
Yeah.
So the curiosity is not a single line path, right? It's multiple branches which open up through that pathway. And I think that's part of the reason, which is why curiosity kind of falls. And this is what we've observed as children reach that whole middle school age, where they are very conscious of themselves. They want to sound cool. So, one of the things we keep saying is asking questions is cool. So that culture really needs to be ingrained. In our daily STEMonsters programs, we have something known as STEMonsters Asked. So we publish the best questions from across all the batches, and we tell the children that if you ask a good question, it's going to be published. So whatever be the reason, that motivation is there, that I need to ask a question. And it will get better and better and better. And when we say better, it is not about a question which is related to the syllabus, but better in the sense of something which is original, something which makes the teacher pause. So we tell them, if you can ask me a question that I don't have an answer to, you get published.
Good.
Yeah. So yeah.
You mentioned fear quite a lot, and just a bit of brain science again. So when someone is afraid, then their stress response activates, and that automatically shuts down any learning or any curiosity for that matter. So really establishing that sense of safety for them to feel safe enough to ask questions, to keep that curiosity alive, it feels very important.
True. And the other thing which I probably didn't touch upon enough, and I don't want to mention it, this whole culture of instant gratification through the screens. There is overload of information on the internet. I have a question today. I type it in, I get the answer immediately. And we don't want to touch about AI, of course, but I mean, it is a culprit. Let's talk about, let's be honest. In the form that it exists today, it's not doing any favors to the children. So forget about curiosity, forget about cognitive skills. I mean, just the very fact that I am not, or the children don't have to sit with a problem. They have instant answers, means that gap is never open for them to build those pathways to get to the answer. So all of these things put together is something that really pulls down the curiosity of the child as they grow up. So the environment, whether at home, whether at school, whether in the playground, needs to be in a way where every form of questioning is celebrated. Even, if I want to figure out why is she sad today, that's a form of curiosity. And that's doing the same, that's having the same effect on the cognitive skills of the child as asking, why is it foggy during winters? It's just that environment that needs to be cultivated from day one.
Yeah, when you were talking in the beginning about explaining the definition of curiosity, and that there's that information gap between what I know and what I want to know. So the path from what I know to what I want to know is not always an easy path, is it? Right. And here's where you mentioned the instant gratification, and kids today being constantly entertained, sort of. What I find in my practice is that children, and even as adults, we have much lower tolerance for frustration.
Yes.
And sometimes this road from what I know at this moment to what I want to know, it does mean that we have to get frustrated sometimes, because that's part of learning, like practicing and getting your hands on the topic and actually like fully understanding something. It has frustrating elements when you're like, oh, I don't understand, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
We don't want to delve into too much depth of this, but if you go towards understanding how the learner's curve looks like, and that frustration or that hump that the learner has to go over until for them to actually reach the deep level of learning or understanding, it doesn't get talked about. And that's where we lose most of the learners, because unless you overcome that hump of frustration, which leads you to the deep level of understanding, there is the initial, so you suddenly take a lot and you learn a lot very fast. But then that rate slows down. And then there comes a peak. And then once you overcome that peak is when you have reached a deeper level of understanding. And I think we just stop at the hump, and the whole educational system, I wouldn't say whole, but most of the educational system with the testing mechanisms that are in place don't give the children enough time to work through that hump. And they give a false sense of belief that if you can answer so and so questions, which are many a times in the standard systems at least, factual answers, that doesn't lead to proper learning. That doesn't lead to first principles thinking or the scientific mindset. It's important to realize that this level of frustration, the level of somewhat a certain level of anxiety of whether I can reach the goal needs to be there. And there's this term, and I'll just briefly mention it, is Vygotsky's, it's called the zone of proximal development, where you catch the child where they are just about going to face the hump. And then you scaffold them, then you give them scaffolded learning where you kind of help them. You don't tell them the answer, but you give them just enough push through a scaffolded learning pedagogy where they then want to continue to push through. And if you can catch that ZPD, the zone of proximal development in every learner, and you can give them the support that they need to overcome that learning hump, I think every child will remain curious. Every child will reach their full potential. So
that's amazing. So let's move along in this direction in the positives. Yes. Like, what's the hope? You've talked a lot about what happens, why it happens, when it happens, but what can we as parents and educators do when we notice that our child has lost their innate curiosity? And so what are some mindset shifts or anything else that you'd recommend?
We have talked about this in our previous conversations. Children mimic adults. So the job is not to give an answer immediately. You don't have to be the encyclopedia. You don't have to be the Wikipedia giving all answers or the internet, right? The job as a parent or an educator is to remain curious along with them and show a genuine interest in reaching the answer without the instant facts that are available out there. And if they see that every teacher around them is curious about the question that they ask, they are trying to figure out the answer, they are trying to find out, oh, can I show you a demonstration which answers your question? They will feel interested and engage themselves, right? They will want to be like you. They will mimic you knowingly or unknowingly. So that's one of the core changes that educators and parents must realize. To make a child curious, you have to become curious first.
I love that you say that, because this is what I tell all the parents I work with.
Oh,
you have to
wonderful.
be curious, because also from a parent perspective is that we always have to stay curious about our kids' behavior.
Yes.
Because even as adults, I think curiosity is a driving force. Even
for
as
all of
adults,
us,
like we like, what if we lose our curiosity? Then what else?
How
is
do
there?
we grow? Yeah, we can't grow.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yes. Yeah. So can you give us a few specific and practical strategies that maybe we can try out in our own homes?
I can give you a few. It's easier said than done. So let me warn all of you, because like those things, but like with everything else, if you are not yourself curious as a parent, it will take practice for you to become curious. And your job is to protect that gap between what your child is asking and the answer that probably comes first to your mind. So let me give you an example. You need to keep the child curious. It is not a hole waiting to be filled, right? So let's say your child asks, why does the ice melt? Right? Now, the tendency as a parent, and especially if you're coming from a science background, oh, because it's hot. That's the answer. And doors closed, gaps closed. But what if you ask them, oh, yeah, it's melting, isn't it? Do you think it's going to melt if we keep it in the fridge as well? It was not melting in the refrigerator. Do you think it will melt in the icebox? Do you think it will melt faster if we put it in the balcony? Why don't we figure that out? And maybe that will give us a hint into when does the ice melt and why does it melt? While you have partially given an answer, you have also opened 4-5 questions. And that becomes a chain reaction. So when they realize that, oh, okay, maybe it's we're melting faster in the balcony when the sun is out, then the question is, oh, does that mean, of course, the sun is hot. Everybody knows that. But then how hot is it? Let's find out what's the temperature today. So it's no longer a linear path, right? You're going into multiple directions, and that's limitless. And these are all pathways that should come to you genuinely, that without actually being a scientist. Keep that gap open, keep the questions open. Like in our classes, we tell, when we train our teachers or when we talk to our parents, we tell them, if your child comes in with one question, our job is not to give that one answer. Our job is to send them back with 5 questions. So then that's a class well done. So
I love that. I like to say, like, when back to the ice example, the ice melting, what I like to do with my kids is I ask back, like, what do you think? Because then that always also sets them off. And actually my 9-year-old did this experiment with, we had some garlic that started growing in the pantry.
Oh, wow.
And then he took them apart and he left a couple like together, like in a bunch, and he planted them separately. And then he was curious to know which conditions would influence the growth. And then they watered them, like then the smaller one joined in, and it was just so beautiful to see that when you leave them space to explore and you give that scaffolding, as you mentioned, that they can do their own little experiment, then it's naturally within them, even without any scientific training for that matter.
Absolutely, exactly. You don't need to be a scientist to cultivate or nurture that in the house. I remember one of our students, he was building a weather station during one of our modules. And because weather is very, very interdisciplinary, we do a lot of interdisciplinary exploration. So he was building a weather station, and by the end of the module, he'd built a barometer, a thermometer, a wind vane, a anemometer, a bunch of things that come in the weather station. And his younger sister was, I think, 5 years old at the time. So of course she would not understand the ideas about air pressure and things like that. So what she did was she went ahead, she cut a piece of paper, put it on a straw, and she held it out and she said, "This is my wind vane. I know where the wind is blowing." And that's all you need.
And it works.
Yeah. And then her mom took a video of that, sent it to me. But just the fact that the mom encouraged it is a stepping stone for the next exploration, right?
Yeah.
So all you need to do is support. So that's one thing that I really strongly advise. The second thing is probably a little more challenging, but I would still say it nevertheless, is you have to be a little careful when you give questions to children as to whether it is just challenging or whether it is intimidating. That balance is crucial. I hear this a lot from parents, especially if they're not from the science background, that in trying to answer why does the ice melt, they go into the solid, and they go into how the atoms are packed tightly in solids and they need heat to vibrate and they become loose and that becomes liquid and then it becomes gas. 6-year-old, who cares?
It's too complex too quickly.
Too complex, yeah. And it's intimidating. Oh my God, I don't want to go into that. So it is crucial that the balance between challenging and intimidating is maintained. You don't have to, again, be a teacher to know that. All you need to know is your child, when you're giving them a question, is your child lighting up or dozing off into sleep? That's your signal.
Yeah.
So that's
there was a very famous Hungarian story writer. He's passed away now, but his saying was that you can talk about any topic to any age child. It's just the way you talk about it is what matters. And I think this is just crucial piece of information that, yes, they will eventually have to learn about the structure of water and, in chemistry, and especially if they want to then, become a meteorologist. But is it relevant at this point?
Exactly. Yeah. So just use your gut instinct. Every parent knows whether the child is excited or bored. So just use your gut instinct and stay with them. I think that's very important. And by all of this, I'm nowhere saying that you should not use screens. You should not encourage them to find answers in books or even screens for that matter. But again, all of this comes from judgment as a parent. So trust your instinct. Trust what you think will help them to explore more or what will close that gap of questions. Just be that support system. Let them build their own building.
Yeah.
So,
oh, thank you. This is wonderful. I want to ask you a question about older kids, like when they grow into tweens and teens, and you mentioned that being a crucial time
yep.
in terms of keeping curiosity alive, and that's usually a time when testing is more relevant for their future studies as well. So how can we still keep curiosity alive while everything else is telling them that they need to have good grades?
Tough, definitely, but not undoable, as we have seen in our programs now. The most important thing is to help the child, is to protect the autonomy of the child. As children grow up, not everybody grows up to be a scientist. Some might have an interest in music, some in art, some in sciences. Whatever be their interest, help to protect that autonomy. Help them go further, deeper into whatever field that they choose to be in. And I think that's all that is required, because by that time they have developed their own way of learning. And we can go into different kinds of curiosity and all. So we'll not go into that. Maybe we'll talk about it later. But ultimately, the overarching umbrella of curiosity is just letting the children own the questions. That's basically it.
Yeah.
And just be curious with them. They come back to you, give you an answer about a new musical instrument. Show genuine interest. Keep your inner child alive.
Yeah, which also makes parenting more fun.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay, Sonali, if there's one thing that you want a parent listening today take away, if it's a parent who's worried about their child losing that spark, what would that be?
One thing. I think as we started, it's a closed loop. So you don't have to give curiosity to your child. You just have to ensure that that curiosity doesn't die. And in order to make sure that the curiosity doesn't die, remain curious yourself and support them through their questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sonali. And I know that you don't want to leave parents just with the theory. So can you tell us a little bit about all the work that you do in your STEMonsters education programs, and how you achieve all of this for your students, and how can parents find out more about the programs if they are interested for their own children?
Sure. I'm the founder of an organization called STEMonsters Education, where we do both in school and after school programs. So for the audience of this podcast, I think the more relevant one is the after school programs that we run. These are a structured curriculum program of the textbooks, interdisciplinary by nature and completely hands-on and experiential. We start from grades 3 or about age 8 all the way up to grades 12. These are online. To find out more, you can visit the website. We will be putting it in the podcast notes. So it's www.STEMonsters.com with a single M. I just want to leave the parents with one statement, and that is that curiosity, exploration, scientific mindset, they cannot be built in a few weeks. They take time and they need to be nurtured. So whenever you are doing whatever you are doing, make sure that the exploration continues for years, which is also why our programs are multi-year programs. And we have seen enough evidence of how that curiosity can be retained all the way up to high school and more. So it is absolutely doable. It's just that you have to be with your children all the way.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This sounds like an amazing opportunity. So parents, if you have a child who's interested in any kind of STEM, Sonali is your person. I have definitely talked about coding programs for my own son, and we definitely talk about these things as well. So thank you so much for this lovely conversation. I've learned so much, and I'm definitely going to be more mindful of like how I approach certain things with my own children as well. So thank you for giving all these practical tips today, Sonali. So, and to our listeners, if there is a topic that you'd love us to explore, feel free to message either Sonali or me, or leave a comment We would love to hear from you, give you information and our knowledge on topics that help you raise curious children. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Thank you. And until next time, stay curious and stay connected.
Thanks for joining us on Nurturing Minds. We hope today's conversation gave you something to think about or try out in your own life.
If you enjoyed the episode, please follow or subscribe. Leave us a rating and share it with anyone who might find it helpful.
And if there's a topic you'd love us to explore, feel free to message us or leave a comment. We would love to hear from you.
Until next time, stay curious, connected, and kind.